Welcome to Leadership Where It Matters Most. The family is the most important institution in the world. The future of the church passes through the family. The church has the greatest mission of any organization ever. Go and make disciples of all nations. The family and the church. This is where leadership matters most. Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to Leadership Where It Matters Most. Today's guest is Dick Vollet. I've known Dick many years and recently have had the incredible blessing of working quite closely with him on a couple committees. And it's been a real blessing because I've always known Dick and his leadership presence and acumen and excellence, but kind of from afar. And this last little bit of a season, I've been able to see it firsthand, and it confirmed all the good that I saw in him, even from afar. So this is a neat recording because I've known Dick as a leader with sort of in the big brand retail industry. I've known him by reputation for his work in the poverty space and in securing homes for homeless people. And I've known him in healthcare. Certainly, he was the president and CEO of the St. Paul's Hospital Foundation, which over a very short period of time raised, I think it's $285 or $265 million. I believe at the time he secured the largest gift for healthcare ever given, I believe, in the province of British Columbia. It's all those accomplishments, but it's who he is as a person, because he's very caring, he's very humble, very empathetic. His motives are just so good. And so I really wanted to have him on the podcast. He agreed to come on. And, it's just, you're hearing from a man who's been there, done that. He's done so many neat things, many of which you hear in the podcast. Once again, what came to mind is John Maxwell's definition of success, where he says, success is when those closest to you respect and appreciate you the most. And this is what I found with Dick, is that the closer I get to him, the more impressive and impactful his life and leadership is. So lots of wisdom in a short period of time. So enjoy this episode with Dick Vollet. Dick Vollet, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for being here.
My pleasure. I'm glad I'm here, Brett.
And it finally worked out. We had some issues in the building. We had some technology problems and found out that it was squirrels that had attacked our cable coming into the building. So the squirrels have not prevailed, and here we are on the conversation.
Excellent.
So Dick, for people that are not as familiar with you as they should be, why don't you just get us started by kind of walking us through, high level, kind of the career and all the stops along the way. What have you been up to over the last 25 years?
Yeah, quite a bit, and some would say very diverse. I've jumped around a little bit, but all with good purpose and intention. I guess the bulk of my career was spent at London Drugs, which is in the H.Y. Louis group. I had a couple of positions there. I actually was a store manager for a very short period of time, running one of the stores in the chain, and then took on a role with HR, moved into operations, became the VP of operations, where I spent the majority of my time running 3 companies for the H.Y. Louis group, including Sonora Resorts and a tech firm as well. So very diverse under one umbrella. But then the Olympics were coming to town, and I knew it was only going to happen one time in my lifetime. So I took my departure from London Drugs and joined VANOC 2010, working for John Furlong. And it was interesting because I jumped in there very at a HR level, VP of HR, which, I had an HR background, but not at that level, and ended up running all the mountain operations at Games Time, which was, I could tell stories about that for a long time. And when the Olympics were over, I really didn't want to go back into retail. I wanted to try something else, something different. And a good friend of mine said, you should try this not-for-profit thing. It's actually a lot of fun. And so I took on in my first role with Street to Home Foundation, trying to solve homelessness with Gregor Robertson and his term in the city office. And so I tried that for a couple of years, raised some money, opened some great housing, but realized very quickly that we were too far downstream trying to solve homelessness. And so when St. Paul's Hospital was looking for a new CEO of the foundation, I got the call, and I spent the last 12 years of my not-for-profit career raising money for the new hospital.
That's awesome. You know, you mentioned the word diverse, and that's certainly, as an outsider looking in, there's two words that actually come to mind when I think about some of the things you've done, Dick, over the years. One is diversity, because, yeah, like a big retail brand, you know, poverty and homelessness, the Olympics, you know, and then healthcare. Like you're all over the map kind of thing in a certain way. But the other thing is, I think big because I mean, there's people that, you know, run events or have events as part of their portfolio. And then there's people that run the Olympics. You know, there's people that raise money. And then there's you who over 4 years in the foundation raised, I think, $285 million for the new St. Paul's Hospital.
Yeah.
So diverse and big. But I'm curious, Dick, like from your own perspective, you're a reflective guy. What are the words that come to mind for you as you think about your own career and all the things you've been involved in? What comes to mind for you? What are the words that summarize?
Yeah, I think the first one is satisfying. One of the things, when I think about what I'm going to do or where I'm going to go next is, it's got to really resonate with me from a faith perspective. First of all, it's got to really align with what I want to do with my life according to my faith. And then second of all, I really want to help people. I want to see people do things that they don't think they can do. I love building teams. So yeah, satisfying for me is probably one of
Yeah.
the key words that
Yeah.
resonates with me.
We could leave it
Yeah.
there. Satisfying is, there could be worse words to summarize someone's career. So that's wonderful. You know, because of the diversity and jumping into all these things, you mentioned one thing already in terms of, you know, the next opportunity really has to be discerned. Does it align well with my faith? There's a lot of people that, you know, either just have an itch that they want to go into something new. They may not know what that is. Maybe you've got somebody that's listening that's been, you know, part of a big corporation that's thinking about, you know, maybe starting their own thing. But what is some advice that you would give for people thinking about making a shift? Because you've made several shifts and you've done it successfully and you've entered into places that is quite
Mm,
different than the environment you left. Is there some words of wisdom that you would give
mm.
to people?
Yeah, I think you use the word discerning, and I think that's really important. All the changes I made in my career path were on my agenda, sort of when I wanted to make those changes, and I did it. I did it with the utmost respect for
Mm,
where I was leaving and for also where I was going. And so it wasn't. I never looked at it as an employment contract. It was always I was part of the whatever I was doing. Now, obviously, the Olympics came to an end, and everybody, left
mm,
at the end of the Olympics. But I kind of jokingly say I was one of the last four people standing at the Olympics
wow.
at Bannock, just to wrap some things up. And that's because I didn't want to leave things undone. So I guess my advice to people who are trying to make a shift or trying to make a transition is really think about, discern, what are the reasons you're
Mm,
making that shift. Are they financial? Are they, we could talk about ego. We could talk about why you want to make that shift. What do you want to do? Do you want to leave a legacy? Do you want to be part of something bigger than you could ever
mm,
imagine you could be part of? So yeah, all those things. Yeah, I think just really reflect on why.
yeah.
What is the why? And a lot of people don't think about that. It's always, for more money or a bigger title or a bigger office or a bigger whatever something, and moving up the ladder. A quick story. I always My two boys are actually very successful young men in the business world themselves, and I remember having a conversation with one of my oldest son who wanted to make a shift in his career, and he asked my advice, which I always was flattered that my son would ask my advice. And we spent most of the time talking about jumping from one thing to the next and being prepared to drop down the
Mm,
ladder, a number of rungs on that ladder, to only succeed on a higher ladder. And I said, it's going to take personal sacrifice. It's going to take a
mm,
lot of things that you may have never done before in your life. And it was an interesting conversation because the light bulb went on for him that it wasn't always about moving up the ladder, progressing through your career. It was about doing the right things and jumping off where you need
yeah,
to jump off
that's
from.
great. It reminds me, I didn't prepare you for this, Dick, but I'll never forget a conversation I had with a young leader who aspired for more. And the way he framed it to me is, I want more leadership. And, I was just like, what do you mean by that? He kind of went back and forth, and I was like, well, let me tell you my experience of more leadership. It means you're serving more people. It means in many ways you have more bosses. There's more feet to wash. There's more sacrifices. There's more responsibility there, and the list goes on and on. But it was like, sometimes I think we kid ourselves, and we can even virtue signal when we're presenting these ideas. I want this, I want that. And it's like, what's really at the heart of this? And that's why that word motive, I think, is so good. Let me just jump. This is really a question I love to talk to people who have been so fruitful in their career as you have. When you think about the leadership lessons that you've learned along the way, what comes to mind? What are the most important leadership lessons you've learned throughout the years of your career?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think it's one that, there's a lot of, canned answers that a lot of leaders give.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to do that.
Thank you.
Because I truly believe that one of the number one lessons I learned a long time ago, early on in my career, was that it was never about me. It's leadership is never about me. Leadership is, if you truly believe in servant leadership, if you truly believe that you are there to make sure people around you are successful and the business is successful, or the enterprise is successful, and you put yourself second, you will always be very successful as a leader. So the number one thing for me is be humble, realize it's not about you. You're a servant leader. You're there to make other people successful. And, I think it's an old quote, but it's one that I've always held on to. And there was a speaker, his name's Zig Ziglar. I don't even think he's alive anymore, but he said, you can have everything in life you want if you just help enough other people get what they want.
Right. That's awesome. Yep.
Yeah.
And I see it. I see it in you. I see it lived out and witnessed. I'm curious, and you may not even want to talk about this. I'm putting you on the spot a little bit, but there's a lot of leaders that will take an opportunity, one that emerges or one that they go and seek it out. And within 3 or 4 months, they realize, yeah, this is not necessarily what I signed up for. It could be that the culture is just different than you thought. It could be the role specifically has a different mandate, even than you thought you were interviewing for. Have you found yourself in that situation ever? And what did you do to kind of use agency to clarify what needed to be clarified? Have you been in that situation?
Yeah, I have. And, it's one of the things that doesn't appear on your resume. And, when I gave the flyover of my career, I didn't really talk about it.
Mm.
And so there was a little gap when I left London Drugs before I joined the Olympics. A friend of mine that I'd known for a long time had a chain of linen stores, and he was trying to grow them across Canada. And so he recruited me, and that typical situation where he says, write everything you want on a piece of paper. And so I did, and he said, okay, done. So then what do you do, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, I make the leap. I become the CEO of a small company. We had lots of capital. Long story short, I did in about a year what we thought was going to take about 2 or 3 years. And then, yeah, the culture didn't fit. And I don't need to get into it, but I think a lot of times you learn from leaders who are not following your style or your belief or your heart, that you learn very quickly how you don't want to act. And I learned more from leaders like that than I did from good leaders. So that ended fairly quickly, I would say within about a year and a half. And then I joined the Olympics after that. But I found myself sitting there. I was gonna roll up my sleeves and keep going at it, because that's just who I am. But we came to an agreement that it was probably better we parted ways.
Yeah. Yeah. What about a situation, you've taken on a role and maybe you're confronting a little insecurity. It's like, man, I don't know if I got the goods for this. And one of the reasons why I asked this, it's funny, Dick, because I never would have asked this even 10 years ago, but I have seen time and time again, very well-known successful leaders speak to this imposter syndrome or this insecurity that I have ascended to my level of incompetence. I mean, Michael Hyatt, who ran Thomas Nelson Publishers, Richard Branson, like a lot of people have said this. Have you ever been in that situation where you're like, oh boy, what did I sign up for?
Yeah, I sure have, Brett. And one of the books I read early in my career was The Peter Principle, which I found was a really interesting book around rising to your level of incompetence or
Mm-hmm.
competence. Anyway, I remember this like it was yesterday. As I said, I started at London Drugs in a store stocking toilet paper, and worked up my way up through the ranks fairly quickly. About 2.5 years, I was a store manager, and my district manager at the time was a career London Drugs individual, and she was great. And we became fast friends long after that. But when I took on the vice president of operations role, I was then her boss,
Mm.
and she was still in the same position when I had started with the company. So she was on vacation when I took the role and moved into my office, and her office was right next door to mine. So on the first day back from vacation, I was sitting in my office 7:30 in the morning, like I normally was before the president got there.
Mm.
And she would walk down the hall, and she looked in the door. She said good morning, and she goes, it's not a joke," and walked away. And yeah, so right
Whoa.
away, I knew that I I had some adversity that I needed to overcome with some pretty senior people in the organization. And
Wow.
so I right away I remember talking to my wife saying, I think I've taken on a role that's gonna bury me. I don't think I can do this one. And fast forward, things worked out. We did some big changes, big sweeping changes. The company became very successful, and the team stayed together. Nobody left,
Hmm.
and it ended up being okay. But it wasn't without a lot of adversity, a lot of soul searching, me digging really deep to make sure that I was the right person for the role. Of course, I was younger by 10 years than
Mm.
most of my subordinates.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a tough one.
Yeah, that doesn't make it easy. Over the years, what's been more difficult to lead, Dick? People or strategy?
Well, one doesn't work without the other. So
Mm-hmm.
it's always difficult to say which one's more difficult to lead. But I think people are always more difficult to lead, especially if you don't lead with humility or with servant leadership attitudes. If you go in there like you're the boss and you're gonna drive the bus, then I think people are always harder to lead. But again, as I said, you can't succeed in strategy or execute a strategy without people, and you can't do it alone.
No, absolutely. How about culture? What has been your sort of lessons learned or your go to principles for really establishing a good, healthy, strong culture?
Yeah, culture is one of those things that it's very hard to measure. And when someone says, "What's your culture like in your organization?" I think most people get it wrong.
Mm.
In terms of you can do all the pulse check surveys you want, you can have all sorts of tools to measure it, but most people get it wrong. So I think the number one thing for me, building a culture, creating a culture, is lead by example.
Mm.
And I really believe that. I think if I expect someone to do something within the organization or within the team, then I better be willing to do it myself, or have already done it, or have shown them or proven to them that I can do it.
Yeah.
And that, some CEOs say, well, I don't need to know how to run the IT backbone. I don't need to know how the servers work and all that kind. No, you don't, but you do need to know how to show up on time, don't be late for meetings, stay engaged in meetings, be responsive to email, answer the phone when you're called. Like, there's certain things that leaders do
Hmm.
that set the bar for how they expect the rest of the team to perform.
Yeah,
And I think those kinds of things are really important.
absolutely. One of the things I've observed, and you and I I get to work on some committees with you, but one of the things that stands out for me, Dick, with you and your witness and leadership is your preparation.
Mm.
So you are always prepared. And I see it as two strengths that both sort of fall under this preparation. The first I would say is like proximate preparation. It's, being ready for a meeting, having data, all of that. But then there's this whole nother level, which I would call remote preparation, which I think is the fruit of a career intentionally lived. Like
Mm.
you've gone through so many things and you've been reflective and discerning about everything. And when you, like, I think John Maxwell said, experience isn't the best teacher, it's evaluated experience that's the best teacher. You can go through 20 years of career experiences, but if you're not reflecting on it, it's like Socrates said, the unexamined life is not worth living. So there's a remote preparation that is very clear with you. And that allows you to be grounded in every situation, to speak clearly, to give direction, and to know what you know and know what you don't know and be okay with it. Because you're not panicking. You know what I mean? So, anyways, I'm just saying that to you. You didn't bring it up, but that is certainly something I've witnessed in you in terms of setting an example, is just the preparation. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's funny you say that, and thank you for those comments. I appreciate that because I do like to be prepared, and it's something I learned early on in my days at Vanok
Mm,
when I was at the 2010 Olympics. Drinking from a fire hose is something that I don't think even comes close to what we did at the Olympics. And so I remember, you show up, your days are long, your meetings are rigorous, you have to be prepared, you need to know what you're talking about, all those things. And when you're sitting in a meeting with other vice presidents and you've got sport, venue management, overlay, food and bev, all the guys that run the big venues, and Cypress Mountain was the one that came to mind for me with no snow.
yeah.
We met every morning at 5 o'clock in the morning to figure out what we're going to do for that day, and then we met every night at 8 o'clock to figure out what worked and what we're going to do the next day.
Wow.
And that went on for probably a 2-week period leading up to the games because we had to get it right. We couldn't be wrong. So if you don't show up for those meetings prepared, if you don't show up to those meetings ready to take a wild idea and put it into play, you're going to get buried pretty quick by not only your team, but by the other vice presidents that don't have faith in you that you're going to be able to run that venue properly. So the Olympics taught me so much that they not very many things scare me anymore, Brett,
Yeah.
after the Olympics. And I think it was one of those things, to your point, reflecting on those experiences. I reflect on them all the time, and I use them in my everyday life.
Yeah. Could we just talk about that? Because I remember that story, and all of us remember the story of the no snow, the threat of no snow. And here you are, like, you're responsible and you're on a world stage and the entire globe is watching. Like, stakes are high, man. That must have been an insane season. Did you sleep, like, at all?
Uh, yeah, I had to because it's like the oxygen mask thing on a plane. Put your own on first, so you got to take care of yourself.
Yeah.
So I tried really hard to make sure that I, ate well, slept well. It was only one of 7 venues that I had under my purview. So it was not like it was the only one, but it was the most important one for sure. And then the team. I can't say enough about the team.
Mm,
There was a core group of, I would say, about 8 people that were in those meetings all the time, and they are people that some of them I stay in touch with still today.
wow.
You just build relationships that are. It's like going to war together, and you really achieve something that no one thought was even possible.
Yeah. Yeah. That must have made it so special, Dick, when you're working with people that you really care for and you accomplish what you guys were able to do. I can't imagine just the joy and satisfaction and meaning that you must have got from that experience.
Yeah, satisfaction for sure. Not a lot of joy until afterwards when it was done, but yeah, it was a quick little story too. A lot of people don't know this, but when we executed the no snow plan, which was bringing in hay bales and shortening finish lines and building the ski cross course out of plywood and 2x4s. When we executed that plan, if it had actually snowed, we would have been in big trouble
Wow.
because dirt paths were used for spectators. Um, if we got snow, it would have just been a nightmare. It would have been worse. So we were actually, once we executed the plan, we were praying for no snow. We
Yeah.
were actually saying, "Oh, snow."
Oh my gosh. I can't imagine. I just remember stories. Safe watching on my couch, unlike you. So, number of years, Dick, maybe you can say a few words about leadership generally. Like, what have you seen that has, over the years remained very central to what leadership really is? And where do you think leadership is changing or maybe will be changing in the future? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a big question, Brett, because I think, depending on the industry or sector you're in, how big your team is, what are you trying to achieve? I think some of the core fundamentals stay exactly the same. You have to understand people. You need to be humble. You need to, check your ego at the door, and all those things. I think what's changed is leaders aren't allowed to be uh, driven or drivers as hard as they used to be in the past.
Mm,
I'll preface my comment there a little bit. I think my belief, my experience, again, is that the generations don't respond the same to leadership as they did 20 or 25 years ago. A good example of that is when I was, at London Drugs, or changing into the Olympics, or moving into the foundations, doing my not-for-profit work. I think in my entire career, I've only ever applied for 2 jobs.
hmm,
Internal promotions came because of my work ethic and my leadership and my skills. People approached me to move me up the ranks. Now, I didn't apply for those positions. And I never asked, I've only asked for one raise in my entire life. And that was a discussion because someone said, "We haven't given you a raise for about 6 years. Do you think you deserve one?" Um, so when you think about leadership now, it's how do I negotiate a 10% increase if my organization's only going to give me two? I was listening to a podcast the other day where they were telling this generation, you should have a side hustle.
mm,
Just one job not enough, but you should have a side hustle. And no, you don't need to quit your job while you're doing that side hustle. You should just get a side hustle. And things like that don't really sit well if as a leader I'm going to be giving 110% of me to you and you're giving 60% of you to me. I think that makes leadership, the whole relationship, challenging
mm,
at best.
yeah. Wow. Is there anything specifically to emerging leaders that you would suggest or recommend? Like, how do they, the obvious thing is, be excellent at whatever it is you're supposed to do, add value, at ways that's not expected. But is there anything else that you would say to young emerging leaders?
Yeah, I would say to emerging leaders, I would say don't be afraid to not be liked.
Hmm.
And what I mean by that is make the tough decisions. Regardless of the generations that we currently lead or work with, it doesn't matter if you're afraid to make a decision, or you think that you need to make every decision with a group consensus that everyone agrees that that's the direction you're going to go. Then you as a leader in your organization will fail.
Hmm.
Full stop. At some point in time, you as a leader need to say, here are the decisions I'm going to consult you on, and here are the decisions I'm not going to consult you on. And everyone needs to be okay with that, because a leader is a leader for one reason and one reason only. When the what hits the fan, the CEO has got to step in front of the camera, answer the questions, you know, be responsible and accountable to the outcomes or the decisions that were made,
Hmm.
whether it's a group decision or an individual decision.
Yeah.
So as a leader, you have to be fearless. You have to be able to step in and take responsibility for whatever that decision is, and hold yourself and your team accountable.
Yeah. Absolutely. I suppose that might be getting, in a certain sense, it could be getting easier because information is accessible to us at rates that's crazy, and yet is it almost like we have too much information available to us, which makes the decisions even harder? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, again, what I always say to my sons and anyone else who is going to debate whatever it's going to be, you know, around, I always say, where's your source of truth?
Mm,
So, what is your source of truth? It was it the internet? Okay, which site? Was it deep? Was it deep fake? Was it AI generated? Is it? How do you know it's real?
yeah.
How do you know it's real? Right. So I think the information, to your point, Brett, it's very available, and you're right. It's at our fingertips. I mean, we all have these phones that are more powerful than Apollo 13.
Yeah, that's right.
But basically, what's your source of truth? I think people need to really take a step back and say, what are my inputs here? What is driving my, my decision making, or how am I showing up? And what am I using as my source of truth?
Yeah, very good. So, Dick, imagine you're at your own retirement and you've got a number of people from all the different organizations and roles and things that you had. And, they're going to line up, and a handful of them are going to speak in honor of your life and your service and your leadership and your career. What do you want them to say? How do you want to be remembered as a leader?
Wow, that is a really tough question, Brett.
The big one.
It is a big one. Again, it comes down to legacy, right? I mean, what do you want people to say about you is always a tough one, because when I did retire from the St. Paul's Foundation, I didn't want a party. I actually told my team I don't want a retirement party. We ended up having a donor event, which some people said some really nice things, and it was really nice. But I just want people to see me for who I am and who I was. That I was a caring, compassionate, humble leader that always put their interests first before my own. Yeah, just everything I did in my career, Brett, was because I wanted to make a difference, make an impact in a positive way, right?
Yeah.
And not just on me and the team around me, but on humanity, on the general population, on making the world a better place, right? Sometimes I was okay and I achieved that, and other times I didn't. And when it didn't work out, I made decisions that moved me in a direction that would help me to get there.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I mean, as an outsider looking in for most of that time, but now getting to work with you more concretely on some things, it won't be a surprise to me when that happens and everybody says the things you want said, because that's how you carry yourself. It's wonderful to witness. Now, you're a lot more than just an outstanding leader, Dick. You're a golfer. I didn't prepare you for this, but I'm curious because would you be considered a scratch golfer, or what's the term that describes how good you are at the game?
Yeah, I think scratch is. I mean, everyone measures everyone by their handicap, right?
Yeah.
So scratch.
Yeah,
that's my handicap.
you've been club champion, at least.
Seniors club champion twice. Yeah.
Yeah. So, is there any, I don't know, either fun stories or interesting people that you've golfed with that come to mind?
Yeah, well, I've been really lucky in my golfing career, I guess, if you want to call it. When the PGA Tour came to Vancouver, first it was at the Air Canada Championship. It was at Northview, and there was always a pro-am on Wednesdays. So I've been lucky enough to play with the likes of Payne Stewart.
Oh, wow.
Lee Jansen. I played with him one year. Just some really nice, great people. Got to play with some of the pros and get inside the ropes, which is always kind of fun.
Yeah.
And then more recently, because I'm a member at Shaughnessy, and everybody wants to play Shaughnessy all the time. So when Alice Cooper was in town, he was looking for a game. As you know,
Really?
Alice Cooper's a big golfer.
Yeah.
And so the club called me up and said, would you come play golf with Alice Cooper? He wants to get a member to show him around.
Wow.
So I got to play with Alice Cooper. So I have the great picture of Alice Cooper choking me around the neck, right? Which is kind of funny. And
yeah,
I showed it to my kids. It was great. We laughed a lot about that.
Yeah. He what year was that, Dick? Because he's gone through some pretty significant spiritual transformations.
He has. Well, his father's a pastor. So wow. He has a very interesting, like his outward, persona, his stage presence is not who the man is. Like, he's such a humble, warm, caring, compassionate guy. Like, he's great. So that was probably, I'm going to say 6 years ago, maybe 7.
Yeah. Wow. Oh, that must have been neat. Very good. Yeah. And we'll be golfing in a similar tournament in early May. You guys won it, the scramble last year. So we're setting our sights on taking the championship this year, Dick. We'll see.
Well, we'll do our best to defend it.
Yeah, exactly. drawing to a close. We're going to wrap this up, but I don't want to miss the opportunity. And I'm just trying to think, who's the audience that Dick could speak to and say some final things, whether it's emerging leaders or maybe it's fathers who are balancing career and the demands of being engaged and all the rest of it. What final words would you want to say to anybody who's willing to listen?
It's interesting because one of the things I spent a lot of time, or did spend a lot of time, at least with our kids and with I have a few mentees, some young leaders that I'm mentoring. I select them very carefully because you got to want to do the work, right? It's not going to come to you easy. And we spend a lot of time talking about delayed gratification.
Mm.
And I think, leaders today are looking for too quick of a win. They want immediate results. They're not ready to put in the ground strokes or the hard work to know that this is going to be a 2 or a 3 year process, that, we're not going to see the fruits of our labor for another however many months. And you referred to it earlier about the technology that's available today. We have so much at our fingertips.
Mm.
Everything we have or we get is immediate. There's no delayed gratification. There's no, I need to go through these 5 steps, or I need to even trying to move a board of directors along, right? As a CEO, the first time you report to a board, the board's not going to move in your direction immediately. You need to take time. You need to build relationships. You need to show them results. And so I think the one thing I would say is an emerging leader, a leader coming into a new position, or even a priest trying to, go through some, changes, transformation of their parish, is just be patient. Just be patient. It will come if you do the right things and you act with the right intentions and you lead with the right intentions. It's not easy, but it's, patience is the number one thing.
Yeah. What is the line? I'm sure you've heard this before, but often we underestimate what we can get done in a short period of time, and we don't realize how much we can get done in a long period of time if we just stay the course and stick with it. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, you course correct along the way, Brett, as we all know. But and that doesn't mean don't be a driver. That doesn't mean sit back and let things come to you. It just means know when to push, know when to stop, know when to lead, know when to guide. It's leadership is an art. It's a skill, but it's more an art, and it's got to come from inside.
Yeah. What are some of the books, maybe in closing, that you've taken and really appreciated over the years?
There's a lot of them.
I'm sure.
There's a lot. I mean, I mentioned the Peter Principle. That's always, if you can get an archive copy of that one, it's always a good one. Pretty dog-eared.
Yeah. You mentioned Zig Ziglar as well.
Yeah, I've read all of the Zig Ziglar books. Those are all, and those are all pretty basic, and everyone reads them and goes, "Oh yeah, I know that, I know that, I know that." But the question is, do you do it?
Yeah, right.
Right? Yeah. Do you actually do it? Do you live it? Do you actually behave that way? Those are the tough ones, right? Because, a good friend of mine gave me a book just recently that I'd read on my last trip, How Big Things Get Done, and it talks about big projects. It's well written, and I can't remember who wrote it, and I gave it away already, so I'll have to wait till I get it back. But it really talks about those, if you're really looking at how big projects get done. And it's not a project management book; it's a leadership book, and it's about making the big decisions and knowing when to, as I said, when to pivot. So that's a good one. Anything Peter Drucker writes,
yeah. Classic.
Anything Peter Drucker writes, I'm all in. I think he's one of the most inspirational leaders and down to earth, writers of the 20th century anyway. Yeah, those are good. I mean, everyone listens to Simon Sinek now.
Yeah.
He's pretty good. I think the books that you read are the ones that you need at the time where you are in your career. Because there's all sorts of different pathways we take, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. That's great. You got some good ones there. Peter Drucker, it's funny because I don't know the exact number, but what's crazy about his life and contribution is that I think it was something like 15 or 20 books he wrote after he turned 80. It's like, that's unbelievable. just the deposit that
Yeah.
he gave. The father
Yeah.
of modern management, I think, is what they call him, right? Father of modern management.
Yeah.
Well, Dick, I think we'll pause there. Thank you. Thanks for coming on the podcast, just for taking the time and for all that you've done and all that you do and the way you do it, which is an inspiration to many. So I just wanted you to know how much you appreciate it. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Brett. I appreciate your time and great questions, by the way. Thanks very much.
Well, hey, I'm curious. So listeners, I'm sure you've been blessed by this, and we will see you next time.